Are you sick of everyone telling you to become a landlord, that everyone should be a real estate investor? Renting's just throwing your money out into the wind, down the toilet. Do you want to actually learn some of the facts? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about the 8.5% rule, and I'll teach you how mortgages work, when it makes sense to rent, and when it makes sense to buy. And I actually think renting makes sense for a lot of people. So first up, we're going to do a test experiment here and just go through a couple of examples. I'm looking at a suburb of Minneapolis, just looking at a general area here. Crazy how much places are renting for right now. $2,500, $2,000, $3,000. This is for like 4-bed house, 3-bed house, 5-bed house. So if you're only looking for like a 1-bedroom apartment, it most of the time makes sense to rent. But I'm talking more for families, for people that are wanting a 2-bed, a 3-bed, something like that. When you're looking at that small place for a short period of time, renting makes sense for a lot of folks there. And so renting here for a house is about $2,000 to $3,000 in this community outside of Minneapolis. Next up, we're going to look at just buying. So I tried to find something fairly modest, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,800 square feet. It's pretty nice. Nothing crazy though. It's just but very livable for a family or a couple roommates here to get. When you're renting, all you're paying is rent. So that's what's nice about that. You know exactly how much of your budget is going towards housing. 20 to 30, maybe 40% of your take-home pay there. You know what the cost is every month. You don't have to take care of toilet leaks, roof leaks, fixing the water heater, fixing the furnace, changing the filter on the furnace sometimes. And that's nice for a lot of people. And next up, we're going to talk about buying. So what's all included when you buy a house in the mortgage? It's not as straightforward as your rent. Your mortgage is going to be your property taxes, your insurance, maintenance, which is a big question mark for sure for a lot of people, and then your mortgage. And that mortgage is going to be payment and interest. So that's somewhat paying off the loan and somewhat paying interest for borrowing the money. First, we'll jump into the things outside the mortgage. So you've got your property taxes. As you know, a lot of states are different on your taxes. Here, we're just going to quick scroll through. There are some states that charge about 0.5%. So if your house is $100,000, that's going to be $500 a year. If your house is $400,000, your property taxes are going to be $4,000 a year, which may seem crazy for a 1% property tax. Right now, we're looking at Minnesota, where I grew up. It's about 1%. That's pretty common. So a $400,000 house is $4,000 a year in taxes. $800,000 house is $8,000 a year in taxes, which is pretty crazy to a lot of people. Got to build the roads and every other good idea. Insurance rates here. So I just looked up one for Minnesota. It's about, for an average house, is $2,500 a year in insurance. And I can say that's similar to my house, which is a fairly modest house. If you get a nicer house, you might be looking at $3,000 to $4,000 a year in insurance. Mortgages. So your monthly payment, it's commonly your PITI, your principal, your interest, and that's really the mortgage, and then your taxes and insurance. A lot of time your taxes and insurance are going to get lumped in with your monthly mortgage payment. The bank wants to pay those because a lot of people try to not pay their taxes or insurance, and then the bank, who actually owns the house a lot of the time, gets screwed over. So your monthly payment on a $400,000 house, assuming you can put 20% down, which obviously is a lot of money to save up for new home buyers. And then most mortgages are a 30-year loan here, and interest rates are 6.6%. I just Googled here the mortgage loan rates, and so we're looking at 6 to 7%. I rounded down here just to help with affordability in this calculator, but it looks like some mortgages might be still in that 7% range, which is crazy. So hopefully the Federal Reserve is bringing those rates down here. So you're looking at a $2,000 a month in principal and interest payment for a $400,000 house, plus your taxes and insurance. This is just an estimate here. We didn't update these, but you're looking at $2,600. So compared to renting, you're kind of right in the ballpark there for like a family size house. So really the costs are going to be quite often pretty close here. So that's generally what takes up the mortgage payment there. And then what's not included is the maintenance cost. So that can vary very widely. If you buy a nice new house, you're going to have almost 0% maintenance costs. If you buy an old fixer upper, you're going to have a lot of maintenance costs those first couple of years. A good rule of thumb there is 1% of the home value. So if you're buying a $400,000 house, a lot of times you'll spend about $4,000 a year. It really depends how easily you can be satisfied. So if you bought a fixer upper and you want the thing super nice, you're going to spend a lot on maintenance, obviously. But if you can kind of remodel one room at a time, maybe one room a year, that can help leave some room in your budget there. So very, very much depends on the age of the house, the condition of the house, how well it was taken care of. So jumping over to this calculator here, we've got property taxes for 1% of the house value, 0.5% for insurance. Maintenance is 1%, which also might be a touch low, but that's mainly coming from me who likes fixer-uppers and likes upgrading the house slowly over time. So your mortgage here, so we calculated a $2,000 mortgage on a $400,000 house. So per year, that's $24,000 in mortgages. This total here so far adds up to 8.5% of that home value. And so that's your $400,000 house, 8.5% of that every single year you're going to pay, which may seem like a lot, but that's the typical expense. So if you want a $400,000 house, just times it by 8.5%, and that's going to be the annual cost for you. $200,000 house times 8.5%, $1 million house, 8.5% or $85,000 a year. You're going to probably be paying in housing. That's the 8.5% rule. So now I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of owning a house. And then at the very end, I'm going to talk about the benefits of renting, which makes sense for a lot of people. This is rent consumer price index. So a lot of you have heard of CPI with inflation that's going on right now. So this is the inflation, basically the CPI of rents. And they have rose over time, which is a shocker to probably no one. So 10 years ago, they were quite cheaper. 10 years before that, they were quite cheaper. So the downside of renting is the lack of stability and how these rents go up over time here. Next chart I want to show you here is the median sales price of houses. So over the last 20 years, houses have increased in value, which makes sense to most people. And so what's nice about a mortgage is that you get the lock-in effect. So this mortgage rate, this 8.5% per year, that's pretty much flatlined. So as rents are going to rise 5-10 years down the line, your mortgage is just going to be consistent forever. And so a 30-year mortgage is going to be, if you bought that 30 years ago, you're still paying the mortgage of your home value from 30 years ago. So it's almost like you lock in your rent rate from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's one way that wealth is built through house ownership. You generally buy the nicest house you can afford, but most people get raises in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. That house price, your mortgage, is equivalent to a rent 20 years ago, 5 years ago. So now as you get a raise, you're now allowed to keep a lot extra. So you now have room in your budget to use that towards other things, including saving and building a nicer lifestyle. To me, I don't think that's spoken enough about is that your mortgage stays the same. So right now, house values are about $450,000 for the median sales price in the US. In 2014, they were $288,000. See, a mortgage for $288,000, you're still paying that level of mortgage, even though now your house is worth $450,000 potentially. Wages do go up over time. That's inflation as well. So here's a chart on the last 70 years of average wage indexing. The average wage in the US right now is $65,000. A decade ago, it was $45,000. Decade before that, it was $35,000. Decade before that, it was $25,000. Decade before that, it was $15,000. When you keep a house for long periods of time, it gets worth more. Your mortgage cost stays the same. And then another benefit here is your amortization, or that's the pay down of your loan. Your first couple years, you'll see the green line. That's your interest paid, $28,000 in this example, and about $5,000 in principal. So you're not paying down a ton of the loan, to be honest. You're paying a lot more interest and a lot less principal at first. You don't really start paying a lot of principal till the back end. It's kind of depressing at times when you first see your mortgage payment being, in this example, $280 going to principal and $1,760 going to interest. So you're just paying the bank a ton of money because they borrowed you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can see over time here to 10 years out in the future, Originally you had $320,000 in a loan. Now you only owe $270,000. So that $50,000 is yours, assuming the house didn't appreciate. But most likely the house did appreciate, and now it's worth a lot more, or it would rent for a lot more money, even though you owe less money on it. You're able to save more because your housing costs are locked in. You're paying down the principal, and your house is worth more money over long periods of time. So that's kind of the trifecta wealth builder of homeownership. Now I'm going to switch the other side of the coin here, and some pros about renting. You maintain flexibility. You might need to test out a job fresh out of school or fresh in your career. And you don't know if you like this location. You don't know if the job's stable. You don't necessarily want to move to a new area. You don't know the good neighborhoods to live in. You don't know the good school districts. So renting makes sense for that short period of time to kind of feel out for a year or two. Where do you want to be? Is this a job you want to stay at long term? And that's very responsible to test out that area and test out the job before overcommitting, because you got to put up a large down payment. In this example, but we had an $80,000 down payment, 20% on a $400,000 house. How long does it take to save up 80 grand? Super long time for me and a lot of other people. Another big benefit with renting is you don't have to do any maintenance. You don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to hire contractors. And some people have really demanding jobs. They have a ton of travel. They have no extra bandwidth, no energy to do home repairs, and they don't have extra money to pay for contractors. So it's tough. It's tight, especially starting out in your career, to have extra money to do remodels. If you want to live it up, you may have to give up some long-term wealth by not doing home ownership and by renting. And I get that. One big underrated thing is if you have the ability to save money. Let's say you had $80,000 and you're trying to decide to do a down payment on a house or keep renting. Well, you can invest that $80,000 in the stock market. It'll make about $8,000 a year. So that can even cover probably half of your rent. Or you can start up a business, or you can get into real estate investing and start renting out and making a profit off of. One big opportunity cost there is being able to invest your down payment. Just because you're renting, obviously, you should still be saving a little bit of money every single paycheck. There is an opportunity cost where when you invest all that money into a house, you don't get to invest it elsewhere, and you don't get to make money on it elsewhere. Now, some of the pros of owning is you get a long-term stability there. It's your house. You can live there as long as you want. That's really nice. You can upgrade the place. You can build cool custom shelving. You can upgrade the kitchen exactly to your needs. You can add a back patio or a swimming pool. And a lot of people that I know have found a lot of fulfillment into making their house a home and giving it the little things that fit their family's needs and just make it a good fit for them. And there's something that's so fulfilling when you look at a little shelf that you just built or custom made or some furniture. Like, it feels so fulfilling. It feels so cool to know that you made your little bubble a better place. You made your house a home, and that's fulfilling for a lot of people. Another big benefit is those long-term fixed costs. So rents raise over time, but my mortgage that I started in 2018 is the same that it was in 2018. If I was renting, my rent would have went up a lot probably since 2018. And I've gotten some raises since 2018 over the last 6 years. So my housing cost has stayed the same, which has been my biggest expense historically. And now I've gotten a couple raises, so I have more discretionary income now. So I'm able to save more money than I was in 2018 because my housing costs are fixed. If my housing costs went up every single year, it may be hard for me to save money long term, but now it's becoming easier with an older and older mortgage. And then appreciation. Pretty much every single house in the country has appreciated a lot since pre-COVID, since 2018. And also, every house has appreciated a lot from 2008 to 2018. The best time to buy real estate was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. But houses appreciate over time, as well as the amortization, which is the loan pay down here. So you can see this remaining balance goes down substantially to where you'll have $100,000+ in equity. And I don't know about you, but it's really hard for me to save up $100,000 out of my paychecks. But if you just buy a house and hang out and live there for a decade, it's pretty easy to have $100,000 in equity, which is crazy to think that you could sell your place and walk away with $100,000. So those are the pros and the cons of rent versus buy in the 8.5% rule. So renting really makes sense, just to summarize this, if you're going to be there for under 5 years, because the housing market does go up and down a little bit. If you're going to stay greater than 5 years, you'll probably outlast any short-term dip in the housing market and you'll make money on your house. Renting makes sense if you're in the middle of a housing crash. If it's 2007, 2008 and houses are just tanking in value, probably doesn't make sense to buy. Probably just hold on. And then if you don't have a down payment, or if you really value flexibility and you're testing out the area or a job, it totally makes sense to rent. But once you feel stable and secure there, you want to live there a long time, it makes sense to buy. And if you want low maintenance, you can totally buy a townhouse or a condo that have very low maintenance. Or you can buy a fixer-upper if you want to learn all those skills. So there's a big variety there. You don't need to feel like you have to buy a fixer-upper by any means. And then buying, if you really value stability and security and having your own place, you want to make your house a home, there's nothing that renting can compare to home ownership in that sense. Also, just long-term wealth. If you want to build wealth over 5, 10, 20 years, locking in your housing costs, saving money as you get raises, and paying down your mortgage and letting your house appreciate, there's nothing in my mind as a average employee that can build wealth like real estate can. Thanks all. Make sure to like and subscribe.